Well, welcome everybody. My name is Jay Weiser. I am the Chief Catalyst and Navigator of Jay Weiser Consulting, and I work with leadership teams, individual leaders, executives on how do you become future fit. And future fitness is really important because, if you think about all the turbulence that's been going on, and I've been talking about this for a number of years. And what's interesting is, unlike any other time, although we say this a lot, it's a hard time to be a leader and a harder time to be a great one. Now, I've been doing consulting probably for about 30 years, a few years in strategy for a couple of companies in between. I've worked with companies like Publix, JP Morgan Chase, Bristol Myers Squibb, Petro-Canada, now Sun Oil. So across a variety of industries and a variety of functions like HR, finance, IT, and marketing. And in all those cases, it's always been working with kind of that C-suite down to C+2 level and working on strategy and execution. And how do you do that in disruptive and uncertain times? In times like this, companies need future fit leaders to thrive in what Amy Edmondson called a sustained crisis environment. Now, the question, though, is, are you future fit? And you're going to have a chance to answer that question. And later on, you will have an opportunity to do a free online assessment. A QR code will be provided later in the session. Now, it's interesting. This story is not new. I gave a presentation back in January 24th, 2020. 6 weeks before COVID hit, and it was to an executive group here in Atlanta. And the title, as you can see, was Becoming and Staying a Relevant and Valuable Leader in the 2020s. Back then, I said disruptions and constant change are the new norm. And you can see some of the quotes from this Egon Zehnder report that unpredictability in business is unprecedented. So we thought, and that is the new steady state. And when executives were asked, are they prepared for this new world? Close to 70% of CEOs polled said they felt unprepared for parts of their job. They recognized the need to transform themselves. And I even had a CEO tell me that if given the chance, he didn't know if he'd rehire his executive team because they had not grown with the business. They had not grown attuned to the level of change. In fact, he said he might not even hire himself in a very self-revealing moment. So I want to see what you think. This is going to be the first of a number of polls. So I want you to answer the first question. And the statement is, I am future fit and ready to thrive as a leader. If you can put in chat, and we're doing chat because we couldn't get polls to work. So I still wanted to ask these questions. So you can write in disagree, somewhat disagree, somewhat agree, and agree. So let's take about a minute and see what folks have to say.
So it looks like we have a combo of agree and somewhat agree.
I see someone's asking about a definition of future fit. Future fit is really about, are you ready to lead in such a turbulent environment where disruptions are constant, where uncertainty is prevalent, and ready to handle that going forward versus shirking away from that. Give folks a few more minutes. Well, a few more seconds. So I think, Michelle, we're seeing, primarily somewhat agree. We're seeing a few agrees. I think we've seen one or two somewhat disagrees. So let's switch it to the second question. You've been talking about how you feel about yourself. Now talk about how you feel about your leadership team. Are they future fit? So if we can do the same thing with the leadership team. Give people a little bit more time to respond. It's interesting. We're seeing a little bit of a shift where, before it was generally towards a somewhat agree. I think it's closer now to the somewhat disagree. So you kind of have to ask, why do you feel this way about yourself, differently about the team? How would your team members rate each other? But the point being, becoming future fit is a challenge and it requires work. So if we look at what's going on in the environment, we have turbulence and uncertainty all over the place. You hear about cybersecurity. It's old news about Silicon Valley Bank. Everyone's talking about ChatGPT, Bard, all the different versions of AI that are out there. We had all the, I guess, initial debacle and then recreation of the board and bringing back the CEO at ChatGPT. Ukraine is still in the news. It's still going on. Issues with trade with China. And now we have the stuff going on in the Middle East. So it is a perma-crisis environment. And reports are saying, excuse me, that it's not going to get any better. In fact, it might get worse over the next couple of years. So boards are challenged in how do you lead in that type of environment? What do you have to do differently? So if we think about pillars of leadership and how do you put together a great leadership team, the first thing is about having the right people with the right mindset, capability, and skills. You want them to be provided the right information that they need to make good decisions, to be aware about what's going on around them, not just outside, but inside the organization, because there's turbulence there as well. If you think about the war for talent that continues to go on, whether or not we return to the office, the mental health crisis that we're dealing with, across the board. People have been through a lot. It's also about having the right structures and processes in terms of how we develop strategy, how do we execute it, how do we manage initiatives, how do we make decisions? And most important, on top of all that, is the leadership team dynamics. How do people work together? How do they communicate with each other? How do you work across functions, and whether or not you do that well? Now that requires us to take a lot of, make a lot of changes, a lot of transformations. Leadership must shift its thinking to thrive. So along the left-hand side, you see some topics or domains. I would generally say the from and to is a continuum. We're coming from historically, maybe even present, what's on the yellow side. And we need to move to the, the future state. So if we think about how people thought in their companies, it was more inward. It was more past and present focus. The world was more predictable. We thought about, our company, our narrow view of the world. Well, now we have to look outward and inward. It's important to think forward. The past is the past. We have to be ready for the future. It's unpredictable. We are all in different ecosystems. So our companies are not operating in vacuums.
Hello, hold on.
How do you respond to crises? A lot of companies are surprised, unprepared, reactive, emotionally and reflexively responding without thinking. We want to be more proactive. We want to be prepared and ready so we can intentionally and thoughtfully respond. The models of leadership are changing from command and control hierarchies and moving to being more distributed, flatter, sharing information. And the same thing when we talk about alignment, different directions, so going in the same direction, not playing to avoid losing and being risk averse, but being risk intelligent, looking at all your risks together holistically, and most importantly, playing to win. Collaboration is the word of the day. Now, in the past, we had our silos. Collaboration was somewhat rare. People wanted to know who to blame when it came to accountability. Now it's about being more cohesive, focused on outcomes. Teams are accountable for delivering those outcomes and have some level of autonomy. And I think it's important to bring this home. This affects all of us in our careers. And, the way you look at a career has changed over the last several years, last 20 years. It's not just our expertise or profession that can carry us, and that we build and grow up the ladder over time. The world now, to be future fit, means you need to surf from wave to wave. So instead of going down after the wave, you've got to jump to that next wave. Skills have a short half-life. You need to spend time continuously developing yourself so that you are future fit. So, quick poll. So when you think about the from and the to state, do you see yourself predominantly yellow, green, or predominantly green based on the domains and topics we just walked through? So let's take a minute. If everybody would please enter their answers. Last chance to enter your answers. I want to see the previous slide. All right, if last chance to get your votes in, last 10 seconds. So it seems that predominantly we're seeing folks in the yellow-green section, and that's good. That means you're starting to make that move to future fitness, but it's also recognizing that there's a way to go to get to that future state. And it's the recognition that new capabilities are needed, that existing capabilities, what we learned, what made us successful in the past, isn't enough. A couple of my favorite quotes. First one from Einstein. is that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them. And you'll hear me talk about thinking differently. And Alvin Toffler, in the book Future Shock, 53 years ago, said the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And the key thing here really is unlearn. It's about getting unstuck from the ways we've done things, getting out of that rut. Somebody said in a prior presentation I gave that a rut is a coffin with the ends kicked out. You need to get out of that rut. You need to unlearn what doesn't work, what is no longer relevant, and relearn what is and learn new. So what are some of the foundational capabilities that are going to help you start to learn, unlearn, and relearn? First, you as leaders have a choice to make. We know we can't choose our circumstances, but every time we can always choose how we respond. And the choice is this. Will you choose to be a captain? Somebody who gets up, to the control area. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank here, but somebody who steps up to the wheel, who stares through the store, who sets a direction, who motivates the crew and knows that they collectively can get through that? Or are you going to be a captive? Someone who says, woe is me. All of this is out of my control. I can't do anything about this, and go to the bottom of the ship at the mercy of the waves. It's important to be the captain, to take agency, to shape what you can, because the alternative is very unpleasant. And you see the remains of companies and fallen and disgraced leaders because they didn't take charge when they could. Second, it's essential to see, think, and do differently. Going back to Einstein's quote, doing it the same way, looking at the same things, thinking about them the same way is going to get the same results. Now, when I talk about seeing differently, it's about looking at things from different perspectives, not just a narrow corporate view, but thinking about it from customer viewpoints, from the employee's viewpoint, from other partners in your ecosystem, from shareholders and the community around you. It's also about the ability to zoom out, to see the big picture, as well as to zoom in to see the detail and to be able to flex your view. Secondly, it's important to think differently. You've got all this new information. How do you process it? And I think one of the most important things that I want to raise is moving from either or thinking, a binary choice, to both and thinking. So if you think about in the past, you go back, you could pay a high price and get high quality, or pay a low price and get lesser quality. That was until companies started to figure out you can do both low price and high quality. Amazon on their Prime trucks at one point had on the side, it said, pick, choose, fast delivery, low price. You're getting both. So when you think about solving problems and somebody says, we can do this or that, why can't we do both? Why can't we figure out that third way to navigate through the problem? Because in this type of environment, there's not one answer. There's a mix of answers, almost like a cocktail or a recipe. And when we think about doing differently, it's essential, to become prepared and resilient. And what does that mean? So if we think about in our own houses, we have flashlights, batteries, water, probably more toilet paper than we had 5 years ago. And we have plans what to do in case of emergency. Where do we meet? Who do we contact? Well, those same things are critical to have in your company. But it's not just if there's a fire or a cyber breach. It's to have a process in place that when information comes in, whether it's losing a customer, whether it's all of a sudden a customer doubling an order, are we ready to act? And being prepared and resilient makes all the difference in the world. Excuse me. So if I haven't convinced you yet, I'm going to show you why new capabilities are needed to thrive. Now, I developed the 5 leadership superpowers a few years back. And actually, as I was coming and putting these together, I realized this is how I've been consulting with my clients over the last 3 decades. Now, the superpowers do not replace core leadership skills. You still need to have a vision. You still need to know about building a strategy, how to make investment decisions, how to review performance, how to communicate. But the 5 leadership superpowers is kind of an overlay, another layer of superpowers, of super capabilities. Each one of the superpowers helps leaders navigate a critical tension that they need to manage in the face of disruption and change. The first superpower is being a present futurist, someone who can balance thinking about the present and thinking about where are we going, what's going on in the environment, integrating the two to inform decision making. Second, we were talking about the need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. An experienced learner is someone who leverages their experience and expertise, but they also recognize it's often inadequate. They challenge what they know. They challenge their assumptions and ask others to do the same and recognize the need to continuously learn. Third is being a prepared risk taker. Risk taking is a part of business. Whether you act or don't act, you're taking some form of a risk. The thing is, and we'll talk about this, how to do that in a smarter way and being prepared. So how do you be prepared and take risks? There's balancing that goes on. Fourth is being a strategic executor. So that's combining strategy and execution and realizing they're tied together. And fifth is being an accountable collaborator. That ability to balance collaboration, working across boundaries, and holding teams accountable, because most things require a team. And we'll talk about each one of these. So let me give you an example for each one. So if we think about being a present futurist, Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Central Bank, back in June gave a speech, and she talked about the series of shocks that have affected Europe. And even more so now with what's going on in the Middle East. She was talking primarily about Ukraine, but just the whole power dynamic. She talked about rising geopolitical tensions and weakening global trade. So that was looking towards the future, but at the same time, she talked about her vision of the future, about how does Europe counteract those uncertainties? How do they work together, reinforce openness in the region to counter the contrasting forces? So leaders who understand the present and are forward thinking are best at guiding their organizations. Now, for those of you thinking about, what is the next step in your career? What is the next position? Think about how you can showcase your foresight, the trends you look at, how you've demonstrated clarity of vision. And being a present futurist is not something you do once. It's something you have to continue to do. Next is being an experienced learner. Now, I don't know if any of you know what WD-40 stands for. We probably all have a can of this somewhere in our apartment, condo, house. Well, WD-40 is a lubricant. WD stands for water displacement. 40 is the number of formulations they went through to come up with the one that worked. Now, some of you might say they failed 39 times. Well, their CEO, Gary Ridge, who was the CEO for the last 30 years, talking about the history of the company, said they weren't failing, they were learning. In fact, he challenged me and said, what does fail mean? We had a phone call about a year ago, and I knew it was kind of a trick question. I said, fail is doing something wrong. And he said, no, it's the first attempt in learning. And WD-40, the company, has gotten rid of the word failure from their culture. They talk about learning moments, and you don't get punished for having a learning moment. Well, that is unless you repeat it over and over. And they talk about having self-responsibility to learn. It's not something that needs to be provided to you, but you need to take advantage of the opportunities you have. Oprah has been a lifelong learner. She's reinvented herself numerous times. She's acquired new skills, new capabilities, and that has fueled the success of most of her endeavors. Someone who's an experienced learner is curious. They ask questions. They welcome debate. If you're in an interview or you're talking and networking with others, have you talked about or shared what you've learned recently, how you've stayed on top of things, how you are keeping yourself relevant in the workforce? Third is being a prepared risk taker. As I said, risk taking is a part of business. It's about playing to win, not hunkering down and playing defense, because it's offense that scores points. When you think about all the different businesses that Amazon has built, they've been built off of a common foundation. They had that strong backbone. That's how they were prepared. They prepared by doing market research. They prepared by running pilots. And those are the things that are important. Even in our own life, we prepare. If you live in Florida, you probably, during hurricane season, have plywood, extra water, batteries, maybe a generator. So think about what you can do in your own career to be better prepared. And when you are talking with other executives, again, networking, an interview, preparing for an interview, think about putting yourself in the leader's shoes and look at what calculated risks can you take. Where is it important to be prepared and take some preventative or proactive steps? And where is it important to stick your neck out? Yeah, I saw a quote this morning on social media, and the quote was, I'd rather be saying, oh, well, than what if. And that is about taking those risks, about taking those chances, but doing it intelligently. Fourth is being a strategic executor. Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines, is a perfect example. When COVID hit almost 4 years ago, they lost 95% of their business in a matter of a week or two. Bastian had an all-employee meeting, and he said, we're throwing out the flight plan, the budget. It's no longer relevant. We've never been in a situation like this before. However, we will be guided by 3 principles. Number 1, protect and serve our employees and customers. That was job 1. Job 2 was to protect cash, because we didn't know how long this was going to last. And number 3 was something he said that I have not heard any other executive say. And he said, job 3 is to protect the future. And that guided many of their decisions in terms of how they offered early retirement. Instead of terminating people, they offered furloughs. They maintained transparent communications. They were careful about protecting their brand and their image. Those decisions paid off when people started traveling again. Delta came back faster and better. Employees came back sooner. And as a result, in 2022, and most likely in 2023, they're going to be recognized as the top airline. CEO Magazine just named Bastian CEO of the Year because of what he's done over the last couple of years. So think about yourself. What have you successfully executed in the face of challenges? What obstacles have you overcome? How have you adapted? How have you made sure that you don't make short-term decisions that impair your future? Fifth is being an accountable collaborator. Ginny Rometty, the former CEO of IBM, during her tenure, focused on a culture of collaboration and accountability that has come out in this IBM Partner Plus program, coming out of years of working with an ecosystem of partners across their services and their products, internally between various teams, externally with companies like Adobe, Bank of America, Ernst & Young, and others, building those partnerships to best serve the customer. She actively supported and made sure leaders supported collaboration with tools, clear plans and goals. This gets started with remote collaboration, with a set of tools and videos on how remote teams could work more effectively. Collaboration is required to face most challenges. It's about, excuse me, it's about focusing on shared outcomes, having the right people on the team, being fit for purpose and fit for the future. And as a leader, what can you do to support that team, remove obstacles, and not micromanage? You know, somebody once said to me, micromanaging is like yelling at a farmer, yelling at his crops. It's not going to make them grow any faster. Yelling is not going to get rid of the weeds. Yelling is not going to get the plants to work together. People are no different. So when you're thinking about your own career, have examples of where you've had collaborative successes, what you've learned, how you've worked across and broken down silos. So you've heard me talk about all 5 superpowers: present futurist, experienced learner, accountable collaborator, prepared risk taker, and strategic executor. All 5. So we're going to take a quick poll here. Now that you've heard of each of the superpowers, which superpower do you think is your strongest? Again, choose between present futurist, experienced learner, prepared risk taker, strategic executor, and accountable collaborator. So I'll give people a minute. Another 30 seconds if everyone would please vote. All right, so this is interesting with what we're seeing so far. I'm seeing a lot of strategic executor about getting stuff done. I've seen a number of accountable collaborators and experienced learners. I'm not sure, probably strategic executor has been number 1. What's been interesting is the ones we're not seeing as much of. So I'll talk about that in a moment. Now let's put in what you think is your weakest superpower. So again, that's between present futurist, experienced learner, prepared risk taker, strategic executor, and accountable collaborator. Another 10 seconds, please put in your answers. So it seems like the ones that are weakest are present futurist and prepared risk taker. Now that's really interesting because in most, I guess I'll say mixed audiences, prepared risk taker and strategic executor tend to be the lowest. In this group, strategic executor was actually one of the highest. The lowest, present futurist and prepared risk taker, are critically important. And think about, in your role, a lot of it has been about getting the job done. But are you also thinking about the longer term? Are you playing it safe? Or are you willing to take some risks? And are you looking towards the future? So I appreciate the input from everybody. When you look at the superpowers collectively, each superpower supports and reinforces the other. That applies to each one. Present futurist informs what you need to learn an experienced learner. Present futurist helps how the environment of work is changing and how do you collaborate given more work from home, more remote work, more collaborative work. Risk-taking and strategy execution go kind of offset and help each other. And being a present futurist helps you see risks sooner so you can act. Now, when you take that all together, how do the superpowers help? Well, you're going to better understand the present and foresee the future, which helps you make better decisions. You're going to know which capabilities you need to build. and recognize the importance of preparedness and resilience. And if you think about a leadership team, being able to apply and implement the superpowers, how much more effective and productive the organization would be. How does it impact results? Well, you're dampening your downside risk and you're recovering faster. And because you're recovering faster, you can pounce on opportunities sooner and amplify your upside return. You're increasing value to all stakeholders. Customers are better served because they're better understood, and employees are able to do their jobs. Employees are more engaged. They're asked for their opinions. They're valued. They're cared for. Ecosystem partners feel like they actually have a true partner, not someone trying to take advantage of them. Communities around you are impacted because of how you're serving the community by reinvesting, by supporting community development. And as a result of all of those things, shareholders win better than before and have a sustainable long-term value creating company. And in the end, I talked about the turbulence and all the disruptions. The superpowers increase your probability of success in that environment. So just kind of a very, very quick poll. You've heard about the 5 leadership superpowers. You've heard about being future fit. If you think about this, where do you see yourself now? Becoming superpowered is essential for future success, and I feel the need to act now. Might be helpful. I should explore this. I'm already superpowered. I just need to keep it up. Or, not important to me. I'm fine as I am. So if you can put your answers in 1, 2, 3, or 4. If everybody would put their answers in, we're seeing a lot of 1s and a couple of 2s. 3, that's good. 2 3s. Well, very good, very good. The thing is to think about this. The superpowers, I believe, are essential. A lot of people I've spoken with, other leaders, other executives, and audiences. And it is important to act, to become future fit, to be more future ready. McKinsey did a study, as well as a number of others, and future fit and prepared leaders have more effective communications, have more, they perform better. And it's by a multiple. So that preparedness and fitness makes a difference. During COVID, it determined which companies survived and in some cases thrived, and which companies failed. I'm going to answer the question about how do you communicate superpowers in a job search in just a moment. So how do you become future ready? First and foremost, I think it's important to assess your future readiness. And I'm going to share with you a link for a free self-assessment you can take. When you do the assessment, identify and prioritize where your gaps are in being future fit and future ready. Attend a training session or training program to become future ready with the 5 leadership superpowers. Work with a coach or a colleague to guide and support you in becoming and staying a future ready leader, because becoming future fit needs to be a leader's top priority, and developing other future fit leaders is a leader's job. So I'm offering a complimentary future ready assessment. It's quick. It takes less than 5 minutes. You can access the survey, excuse me, through the link or through the QR code. Once you answer the questions, you're going to get your results in a personalized report instantly. And you'll have an opportunity to schedule a call or a consultation with me to get more detail behind the report. So I'm just going to leave that up for a moment. Again, it's future-ready.scoreapp.com. And you've got the QR code, and I'll put that back up in a moment. It's the same thing when we're talking about a company. You know, if you're in a company, you're talking with your leadership team. How do you build the case for action? How do you increase awareness? How do you assess the organization, the leadership team, so that you can put together a roadmap to take that company from where it is to being future fit, and educate the executive team and leaders throughout the company, and make becoming future ready part of your leadership development programs. Support and resources. Excuse me. You can email me at j@jweiser.com to request the slides, ask questions, and be notified when I'm going to be offering Becoming Future Fit, which is going to be a 6-week training program, educational program. It will be 90 minutes a week, be very interactive. We'll feature peer learning, and we'll be starting in mid to late January. Connect with and follow me on LinkedIn. So you see my URL, but if you do a search for Jay Weiser on the web, on Google, or on LinkedIn, I'll be up there on the first page. Visit my website, jweiser.com. And again, if you do the assessment, you'll have the link to schedule a free consult. So let me stop there, open it up for questions, and I'll keep this up so folks can still access the assessment.
So if you have a question, raise your hand in a reaction, because then I can keep you in order, and we'll just ask you to come off mute. Anybody? Wow.
So I know one of the questions was, let me just go back here, about how do we communicate the superpowers, you know, in terms of a position. Now, unfortunately, not every senior leader is going to know what the superpowers are. I'm working on that. However, if you think about how can you talk about being a present futurist? How can you ask questions in an interview? You know, what trends most concern you? What are you doing to track and evaluate trends? You can talk about what you see as potential impacts of how the world, the market, the economy is evolving on the business, and having those stories where you were more forward thinking. If we're talking about conveying being an experienced learner, it's not just the fact that you have, you know, 15 or 20 years of experience being a CMO or a CFO, but how are you developing, and how are you developing the people around you to stay abreast, whether it's of new technology, whether it's new marketing approaches, digital transformation, different ways to collaborate to make sure you're staying fresh and relevant. With prepared risk taker, You can talk about, given your past experience, what have you learned about being better prepared? How are you more resilient? How do you take smart risks, knowing that you're not going to grow and that an organization is not going to grow unless it takes chances and places bets? Strategic executor, many of you are very well versed in, and you can talk about how you've executed strategy. You can talk about how you've worked with other leaders to maybe convince them that a short-term decision that looks good in the short term, but doesn't address the long term, that doesn't address protecting the future, is very important. An accountable collaborator. How have you worked across silos? How have you helped support teams be autonomous and accountable for shared outcomes? Have you been clear on how those are communicated so everyone knows what they're working to achieve on that team? Does that answer that question? Is there something a little more that you'd like?
You okay with that, Ash? Asha, I think Ash asked the question.
Yeah, I think that was helpful. Thank you. I appreciate you going through each one of those. I think in this job search process, where, we can highlight that in our resume, it's getting past the algorithms to having the conversation with the right hiring managers. I think that's been a struggle. But I'm taking an alternative approach in that I'm reaching out to my network just to see if there are opportunities for contract work or fractional work at this point. And I think some of what you highlighted here, is good language that I'll, be using in those outreaches as well. So thank you.
And one of the things too, having been through many transitions myself, the algorithm's a pain in the neck. So the question is, how do you get around the algorithm? How can you reach out to that hiring manager or an executive in the organization? Mention that you've applied at some point in that email or message, but also point out, this is what you're seeing. This is how you think. This is how you'll be valuable to the company. Because chances are most of your competitors for that position are not doing that. You'll be offering a fresh perspective. And I can't tell you the number of execs that I've spoken with or people who have attended my education sessions and webinars. And the most common thing is, I never thought about it that way before. That's something I need to look at. So you can play that to your advantage, because getting people again to see, think, and do differently is the trick. Most organizations know that doing the same thing is not going to get them to where they want to go. The thing is, they don't know how to start. And the superpowers can help provide that direction, can help provide that insight.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. It's 12:59 Eastern time. Any other questions? I think we're quiet. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you, Jay. It was great having you with us.
No, my pleasure. And again, I'm here to help and support you in any way I can. I encourage you to take that free assessment, get a sense of where you are, and act. And I appreciate the opportunity, Michelle.
Great. I love a nice assessment, so I will be doing that after we wrap up here, Jay. And just a reminder for everybody, Tuesday morning we're together. Next Wednesday, I actually can't find it. Rachel Rosen is doing something, a return engagement with someone on elevator pitches. I tried to find it during the presentation. I couldn't do it. And for anybody in New York, we're in person next Tuesday night. if anybody's going to be at the holiday or whatever, the winter thing tonight in New York, I'd love to meet you. So thank you, everybody.